Welcome to today's webinar, Caregivers, Learn to Listen to Yourself and Cultivate Beneficial Self-Care Habits. My name is Sarah Tarani, and I'm the Program Coordinator for Triage Cancer. I'll be moderating today's webinar. Now, before we dive into today's topic, I just need to go over some housekeeping. All callers will be muted for the duration of the webinar. If you have any questions or technical problems, please type them in the chat box to the side of your screen. This webinar is being recorded and will be available for viewing at the end of the week on triagecancer.org. And at the end of the webinar, you'll be redirected to a survey. Please take a few moments and fill that out and let us know what you thought of today's webinar. Excuse me, I'm trying to advance my slide here. There we go. Okay. There we go. Sorry. For those of you who aren't aware, Triage Cancer is a national nonprofit organization that provides cancer survivorship education on topics that arise from the point of diagnosis throughout life. And we provide this education in a few different ways. First, we host a speakers bureau of experts in all types of cancer survivorship issues available to organizations putting on an educational event. You can read our speaker bios and request a speaker on our website. And I'll let you know that we're launching a new website soon, hopefully by the end of this month, and it will be a lot easier to even look at the speakers. So stay tuned for that. We also not only participate in events all over the country, but we also host our own educational events for patients, survivors, caregivers, advocates, and healthcare professionals. First of all, we have our Triage Cancer Conference, which is a survivorship it's a survivorship conference that is for everybody, and this year we'll be holding it in Ypsilanti, Michigan. That's coming up in May, Reno, Nevada, and Lewiston, Maine. Travel assistance is available for patients and survivors to attend these events. However, please note that the application for Michigan is now closed. And as you know, we hold a monthly webinar. The next one is on May 16th. The topic is Fostering Resiliency in Families Facing Cancer. In partnership with Cancer and Careers, we offer a free one-day training for healthcare professionals called Navigating Cancer, Work, and Insurance. For more information about that, you can visit our website. And we also offer the Insurance and Finance Intensive. This is a comprehensive certificate program for oncology healthcare professionals and advocates on health and disability insurance and finances. We're hosting an intensive on May 11th in Rancho Mirage, California. Registration is still open on our website. And if you would like an intensive in your area, you can email us at info@triagecancer.org and we'll look into putting that on. In addition to our events, we offer a number of online educational materials and resources. Our quick guides are designed to be a snapshot of a particular topic. They cover areas such as health insurance, employment, clinical trials, financial topics, estate planning, and legal assistance. You may order hard copies of these materials on our website at triagecancer.org/materials request. We also have state-specific resources on our website, including all on topics you'll hear here today. And because where you live can impact the protections you have access to, we have charts of state laws on employment, disability, and health insurance-related issues. We also provide an educational animated video on cancer survivorship topics. We have this one on health insurance basics with key information that you need to know about your health insurance plan, especially to minimize your out-of-pocket costs. These videos are available in English with Spanish subtitles. We plan to release a new video on how to pick a health insurance plan this month, and there'll be more to come after that. And in the future, we hope to actually animate these in Spanish, and so not with just subtitles, but actually presenting them in Spanish. Cancerfinances.org is a site that we host in partnership with the SAM Fund that provides practical information on topics that can impact your finances. We also provide contact information for financial assistance resources there. We just released a new module on education, which covers education rights in school, accessing accommodations, and dealing with student loans. On our educational blog, we provide great information about cancer survivorship topics. But because things are constantly changing in the cancer community, this is how we share our late-breaking news. We also have a monthly newsletter, which you can sign up for, and that will tell you about the events that we're hosting around the country and how to register for those. And I would like to thank Novartis. We're very grateful for their support of the 2018 Triage Cancer webinar series. Now, with no further ado, I'm delighted to introduce you to today's speaker, Julie Larson. Julie is a licensed clinical social worker who spent her career working in oncology supportive care. Julie graduated from Columbia University with her master's in social work in 2004. Today, she has a vibrant private practice working primarily with young adults facing an unexpected medical diagnosis. Julie presents often around the country to both survivors and professional audiences on the impact of serious illness at a young age and living fully after a cancer diagnosis. Welcome, Julie.
Well, thank you, Sarah. I appreciate your introduction and all that good initial information about Triage Cancer. Good to know. You guys offer so many great things. Thank you for having me here, and welcome to everyone that has tuned in and logged in to be here with us today and talk about caregiving. As I understand the demographics of our registrants, of those of you out there, I get the sense that there's a mix of you, that there might be some caregivers listening in today, as well as some survivors and healthcare professionals. As I speak, I think most of my words are going to come from the frame as if I'm talking straight to the caregivers. So if you're a professional, you can listen in that way and figure out your language of how you would work with those in your setting. And if you're a survivor, just a way to relate or think about the experience of those that are caring for you. So without further ado, let's get moving and talk about caregiving. There's so much to talk about here. And hopefully we can go. Hold on, see if I begin to advance. Sarah, do I have the keyboard?
You should now.
Okay. There we go. Okay, thank you. So as you know, cancer is an emotional roller coaster. It brings change, loss, and uncertainty, and certainly not just to the person that's been diagnosed, but to the entire system, all of the family members, in particular those that are considered primary caregivers and everyone else in the periphery. So a caregiver can be that person that lives right at home with somebody, and a caregiver can also be someone that lives hundreds of miles away but tunes in and is connected in a long distance nature. So we're considering the impact of that cancer diagnosis on all those different people. As you might know, the feelings that one experiences as they go through the day-to-day life after a diagnosis of cancer change from day to day. There are days that are hard and confusing and filled with anxiety and fear. And then just the same, there are days when everything feels manageable and feels surrounded by care and support and feel like you have a plan and feel like there's a stronger sense of control. The feelings change all the time. And yet how you feel impacts how you view yourself, the situation, and the road ahead. And if you think about your experience and you think about one of those particularly dark days, that darkness usually isn't just in one area. It tends to seep through and permeate everything, your relationships, your worry about the doctors, your worry about your health, your worry about your body. That sometimes the way we're feeling impacts so many different levels. And then other times it's really just focused on one thing. So you have to think about how that is affecting everything. Everyone responds to cancer in an individual way. And so I say that, and with that said, I hope that wherever you are seated or wherever you are listening to me right now, you can grab a piece of paper and a pen, because it doesn't matter how much you read or gather about coping are the normative feelings of a cancer experience until you begin to figure out your unique reactions, the feelings that are most significant and powerful for you. That's when you begin to understand how you're navigating and managing and coping with your cancer diagnosis. So everyone does this very uniquely. All the feelings are normal, and there's no right or wrong way to feel. I talk about that all the time in my office when I'm working with people, that feelings are feelings. There's nothing inherently wrong or good or bad about a feeling. It's how we respond to that feeling, how we let that feeling grab hold, and what we do with that feeling that can either work or not work for us, be healthy or not so healthy. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more as we go. The complexity of a cancer diagnosis. Okay, there we go. So there's so many different complex things about navigating cancer. And when we think about caregivers, there's often a huge brunt of communication responsibility and many different types of communication, whether that's the communication that you're having not only with the survivor, with your loved one, but also with the medical team and trying to gather information and understand things, side effect management, doctor visits, research, all of that science and that medical aspect of cancer. The emotional communication of fear and uncertainty of everyone's needs, including your own or including, those of other family members. Hope, right up against sadness, gratitude and frustration, worry, all of these different things that you're working to kind of understand and communicate. Administrative. So then in addition to all of the medical and the emotional, there's also the administrative aspect of cancer, the financial concerns, insurance, home management, scheduling, care coordination. It's a lot of different things going on. Not only are there a lot of different types of communication, there are a lot of different people. So working with doctors and nurses and patient navigators and social workers in the medical field. And then that there's a difference in the way you communicate with family members, and even probably a difference between the way that you communicate and talk to immediate family versus extended family and long distance caregivers and young children. Friends hold, and certainly family and friends and medical professionals across the board, the different relationships in your life hold varied personalities, and that requires nuance and savvy, and then helping to direct support for all of the people that kind of come in. How do you direct that in meaningful and focused ways? So there's a lot that's sitting on the lap of a caregiver, in addition to your own feelings and your own experience. When I work with caregivers, and I sat down to write this and to think about this slide was a moment when I just kind of sat back and closed my eyes and thought about, what do they say to me? What do caregivers talk about in my sessions? And these are some of the things I hear. And I don't know if it resonates with the caregivers that are with us today or for professionals that have worked with caregivers a lot, but I listen to my caregivers worry about saying the wrong thing, about being too emotional or not emotional enough, that variant how emotional should one be, not having adequate responses. So when somebody is asking and talking to them and they're needing to say something, and this feeling of needing to say something that's comforting, reassuring, inspiring, hopeful, and not always feeling that they've got what they need to say, or even not knowing how to respond to family and friends when you're balancing privacy and you're balancing kind of confidentiality in the rights of the person that you love. Feeling unable to freely express your feelings, that everyone is so focused on the patient and how they're doing and how they're coping, that it feels sometimes more difficult or more challenging to freely express your frustration, your distress, your own distress, your worry, your sadness. And then navigating, and this is interesting too, I often talk to people about this, navigating when to pull back and when to dive in as you support your loved one. I'm thinking specifically of a man I was working with whose wife very much wanted to still maintain and do so many of the things around the house, despite the fact she was really struggling with fatigue and some neuropathy. And he could see ways that he could help her and he could make it easier for her. But at the end of the day, her needing and wanting that independence and autonomy, what was really what she needed and what she wanted. So that was a true struggle for him as he observed those areas where he wanted to dive in, but knew that what she needed was for him to pull back. And so how you, as a caregiver, you navigate that too. And in the midst of this, who in the world is caring for you? And the pace can be unrelenting. So I often find I'm sitting in my sessions and the beginning of that work is just pacing and slowing down, listening, but bringing that pace down so that we can take a moment and we can bring some space into the picture and talk about you. Self-care begins by listening to yourself, by understanding what I'm feeling, what I'm needing, where am I right now? Because the focus is so much on everything else within the circumstance, the science, the medicine, the doctor's visit, the schedule, the insurance, the maintenance, the logistics, the practicality, the survivor, how they're doing, the family, the children, how everybody has a role. How do we begin to slow down, quiet it all, and listen to you and where you are? And can you name the feelings that you're having? And I say that feelings, but I know that there are people that are very in tune and very aware of what they're feeling. They have a large feeling vocabulary. And then there are others that don't, and they're more thought driven. And so how do you begin to kind of understand both the thoughts that are running through your head that give you information about what you're needing, about where you are right now, and then also the feelings that you're having that might give you clues as to what you need to do to take care of yourself? I get the question a lot. How do I know when worry is anxiety? How do I know when sadness is depression? You know, when can I ascertain if this is something where I need help beyond self-care, beyond kind of fine-tuning my coping? Is it something more serious? And one of my first questions, and it's just pretty basic, is can you grab onto that thought? Can you grab onto that feeling? So can you hold that worry, challenge it, kind of find your way through it, get yourself grounded and focus and be able to move through your day without it kind of hijacking everything? Can you grab it? Similarly with sadness, can you allow that feeling some space and some time to cry, express it, but then circle through and kind of get stabilized again and feel grounded and feel like you can move on with the next thing on your day's list? If you can, that's grabbing onto that feeling. That's being able to kind of contain and compartmentalize, express, and kind of move through. If you can't, if the feeling just keeps coming at you and you're unable to grab it, then I say then it might be something to explore more. And people generally can answer that pretty quickly. Can they grab it or can they not? And certainly diagnostically, and for the professionals in the room, you know there are many more questions to diagnosing anxiety and depression. But sometimes that feeling of can you grab the feeling is one that I watch resonates with my patients in the room, or caregivers in the room. Do you have questions? So a lot of times worry is an unanswered question. And when you feel that worry bubble up and you feel it expand, there's validity in sitting down, slowing down again. Let's listen to ourselves and slow down. But is there a question underneath all of that feeling, the seed of that? And if there is, let's write it down. Let's write down all the questions you can find, because perhaps there's actually some work to be done to find those questions. Maybe that directs conversations with your medical team, or directs conversations with your loved one or with family members. Are there questions? Have you created any assumptions? Catching that and listening. Am I doing fortune telling and thinking this is bound to happen? Or I assume that this is what everybody else is thinking. I assume this is what's going to happen if this treatment doesn't work. If we begin this is my assumption. Now, there's certainly value in planning ahead and preparing oneself, but there can also be a trap in making assumptions and spending energy where you don't need to. So finding and beginning to identify and recognize that's all self-awareness. Work to observe and understand your needs and your limits. We're going to go on in another slide, and we're going to talk about how sometimes stress and feelings manifest themselves physically, And that might always give you clues. That might always, how about that? That will usually give you clues as to when you need to care for yourself. What contributes to having a really great day? You know, sometimes I do have sessions with people and they come in and they're like, you know, it's fine. We're on a good stretch. Things are okay. I don't really know if I need to be here today. And I say often, I am so glad you are here today, because we don't always need to have a session on a day when you're struggling or a day when you're filled with overwhelming emotions. There is so much value in sitting together on a day when things feel okay and things feel like they're humming along pretty easily for you, because let's figure out what it is. What's contributing to having a really great day? Because then on those other days when you're struggling, we might be able to use some of those things and plug it in. So here is that slide I was talking about. For a lot of people, stress manifests itself within your physical body, and we feel it in different ways. And when you're very, very busy, your body might send you the message that you're stressed or overwhelmed before you cognitively and even emotionally understand that to be the case. And everyone, like back to that uniqueness of you and something for your unique notepad or notes from this, it doesn't matter how your loved one feels stress. I mean, it does, because you're going to care for them and you're going to support them. But what I mean by that is that we all do it differently. So the vital, important information for you as you think about caring for yourself is, where does stress hit me? Some people get headaches. Some people get really tense muscles in their shoulders and their back, their lower back. Some people have digestive issues. I mean, there's a truth to the saying, we feel it in our gut, right? So, you know, does your stomach get queasy, or you notice digestive issues? And then just overall fatigue. Fatigue is often the result of having to emotionally and mentally manage so much and keep yourself compartmentalized and moving forward. That takes so much energy, and it can impact us and have us feel fatigue. Stress is fatiguing. So maybe if you're busy and you don't know, but yet you're having headaches or you're feeling tension always, that's a sign. I need to do some self-care. I need to take some time for me. The voice inside your head. So mindfulness, and we're talking about mindful caregiving, and mindfulness is a term that is used more and more frequently. We're talking about it more and more in wellness and mental health, and it's the process of staying present and staying connected to the here and now. And people, when becoming mindful, are tuning into what they're thinking and what they're feeling right this moment, but also the environment around them and their senses. And we're going to talk more about that as this presentation goes on. But something that will prevent you from being in your here and now, prevent you from being mindful and present, is actually the voice in your head. And if you know, if that term, the voice in your head, if you're nodding or smiling, you know what I'm talking about. It's that voice that begins to have scripts or stories and tell you things. And we all do this. Everybody does this. And we all tend to have a certain type of voice in our head. And there are many different thought distortions that are out there in the world, and that people, you know, tend to do. Some of them are negative comparisons. So comparing everybody around. You know, most caregivers have a lot of extra support, and I don't. Most caregivers are out there and don't have to work full time and do all of this. I'm doing so many different things as a caregiver. Most caregivers are, all other caregivers are, able to talk with their doctors, and yet my survivor only wants to be the person that leads every conversation. So while some of those things might be true, and that might be facts of your situation, the way in which you're comparing that to every other circumstance, is that negative comparison, is leaving you on the bottom of the pile every single time. And that's going to affect how you feel. So if you're in negative comparisons, that might be something, that's a voice in your head. Personalizing. The way people are talking about, to me, it's like they don't even think I'm capable of this. It might be something different. Do you personalize things? And sometimes that can get in our way. Catastrophizing. Oh my gosh, I don't know what I'm going to do if this happens. I don't know who I would call. I don't know where I would go. I don't know how I would go. And that anxiety, that builds that anxiety, and it turns everything into an alarm or a 5-alarm fire. And there are times when that is the case, and we do need to figure out what our resources are. But if every single event is that, then we're falling into the trap of catastrophizing, which is leaving us in a state of distress more often than need be. All or nothing thinking, fortune telling, and should, must, and oughts. And should, must, and oughts are so common. And I hear it all the time. I should be doing this. Oh gosh, I ought to be doing this. And I know I should, ought, I know I must do this. Should, must, and oughts get in our way because they lead us up for unrealistic expectations. And again, all of these voices in our head make us feel icky. So how you can begin to catch those tendencies. Oh, you know what? I am a personalizer. And if you know that, then you begin to catch it. There I go again, I'm doing it. And you can have some sense of kind of awareness and some honesty with yourself and some acceptance of that, and then begin to address it. Asking for what you need. It might be hard to consider asking for your needs to be met. I understand that from caregivers. I get that. I hear that a lot. But unmet needs lead to depression. They lead to resentment and frustration and irritation and isolation. If your needs are not getting met, if your tank is not getting filled up, then you're working on empty all the time. And that's making you more stress and vulnerable. And so your needs, absolutely, you need to fill up your tank and you need to ask for what you need. When your needs are met, you are more likely to be responsive and alert to the needs of those you love. So to step away and to give some time for yourself actually makes you more responsive and more alert and more tuned in when you're present. Checking in on what others needs based on their feelings is also an sorry, I had to understand what I wrote there. It was confusing. But checking in about what other needs are, the other people in your life, what their needs are, is an important communication skill. So when you're saying, this is what I'm needing and this is how I'm feeling, and being able to say that to others is an important skill in communication. It's not easy to tell people what we need and how we feel, especially if we're making an ask of somebody, or especially if we're needing to step away, or we're needing to do something that is just for ourselves. But it's an important skill to learn and to cultivate. Back to that worry that I do hear from people, how do I express all these feelings of my own to whether it's other caregivers in my circumstance, or whether it's to my loved one. I'm worried that if I cry too much, it will make them feel down. I don't want to further upset them. I don't want to stress out my wife, my husband, my mother by sharing how I feel, because they're already dealing with that. I don't want them to have to deal with me. But on the other hand, it's an opportunity to connect. That our vulnerability is often what makes us have true connections. And it's an opportunity to share and to join and to sit together in the bottom of the well. That you're not alone, and neither are they. That you both feel fear, that you both feel uncertainty, but you're in this together and you're there for one another. And sometimes when we're not expressing those feelings, when we're keeping it closed, when we're keeping ourselves, tight and giving a presence of being okay, it leads to misperceptions or misinterpretations and distancing. Well, I just didn't think that this was bothering you. I didn't talk to you about it. I didn't ask you because I just didn't think that you were upset by it. And that's a misperception. So, and I've talked to people whose feelings have been hurt because people have not thought that they felt a certain way. And on the other hand, how could they have expressed that and been able to talk about it more openly so that everyone was understanding each other more clearly? Expressing vulnerability can help deepen connections. Distinguishing between thoughts, feelings, and judgments is tricky. So how do we distinguish between what we're thinking and what we're feeling? And like I said, there are people who are better able to articulate what they're thinking, and it's harder for them to tell you what they're feeling. And then there are others who are better able to express their feelings, but it's a lot of work for them to figure out what's the thought behind that feeling. I watch that in my office all the time. When I'm working with somebody, I'm like, well, tell me how that feels. How are you feeling? And they're like, well, I think this. And I think that if I talk to the doctor, this is the answers they're going to give me. And I think that if I could only do this, and that's a lot of thinking. So I say the question again, how do you make you feel? Well, I think this. So they're just people that more touch on or they gravitate toward how they're thinking. And then there are people that come in and their emotion is big in the room. They're either very angry or they're frustrated, they're irritable, they're sad and sobbing and crying. And all those emotions are filling up my office space. And when I say to them, what is making you feel that way? What are you thinking about? It's hard to understand. And it takes a while. So who are you? Are you someone that's kind of more driven by your thinking and need to kind of get in touch with those feelings? Are you someone that has a lot of feeling and need to begin to listen in and tune into what you're thinking? Expressing feelings is a skill. And what I mean by that is that over time, you become better able to both identify your feelings and to express them. All skills get better the more we practice and the more we work on them. It's like building a muscle. So like riding a bike, if it's a skill, you have the opportunity to grow and to get better at learning to identify and express your feelings. Being present. Acknowledge the presence of uncertainty, worry, inadequacy, fear, and then come back to right now. So what I mean by acknowledge the presence is that I think I observe, and I know even for myself, there is such a desire to push it all back, right? To lock it away and to say, nope, don't have time for that feeling today. I got to stay focused. I got to stay in touch with where I'm at right now. This is not something that I can deal with. So we want to push it back. We want to erase it. We do not want to deal with that feeling. But the longer that we push it back and we don't deal with it, it builds with intensity like steam in a teapot. And so there is something beneficial about acknowledging the presence of those feelings. Name it. Hello, worry, you're with me today. Inadequacy, you seem to be right alongside me this morning as I do all of everything I do. Fear, oh, hello, welcome to Tuesday. Acknowledge the feeling, give it to your attention, let it come and sit beside you. I know I'm kind of using metaphors and visualization, but if you think about just letting it come in, accepting that feeling, then sometimes that allows you the ability to get back to your present. Instead of always spending the energy and the time fighting away that feeling, let it come in, let it be with you, acknowledge it, and then also at the same time come back to right now. Are you rehearsing tragedy? Does that make sense when I say rehearsing tragedy? I hear that a lot in my office. People are rehearsing tragedies. And so that's spending a lot of energy, it's spending a lot of thought power on something that's not happening. May not happen ever. So how do you come back to your right now where everything is safe, everything is okay? People have a hard time sometimes in the circumstance of cancer thinking about words like joy, happiness, contentment. How do you lean into those feelings? Find them even in your right now. And often that's through gratitude. So what, if you could just close your eyes and take a moment, what do you feel grateful for? Is there anything? I'm grateful that we're here together. I'm grateful for this medical team. I'm grateful for the opportunity to have doctors and nurses that explain to me what's going on. I'm grateful for the ability to be in my home. I'm grateful for the ability of neighbors that pop over regularly. I'm grateful for this window that I can look out at and see the day. I'm grateful that I can still drive, that I can still engage in activities. I'm grateful for all of these tiny little moments. And it's those things that can begin to open that window and give you that sense and that feeling of joy. What's working for you today? So we often focus so much on what's not working, and it's important to talk about. But what is working? I say that to my clients a lot too. What in the world has gotten you into my office today? What has gotten you to right now? You're sitting in front of me. How have you done it? Something's at work. Something is at work. What is working? How'd you get this far? And what has shifted a moment in the past? So, I think people resist cry. I'm going to use crying as an example. People don't want to cry because they fear that if they start to cry, they may never stop. Well, I don't know that that's ever truly happened, that someone has started to cry and never stopped. Most people stop. I think all people eventually stop. Why? What shifts that moment of distress? Is it that your alarm goes off and you got to get up and get out of bed? Is it you just fall asleep because you cry as you start to fall asleep and your body just falls asleep? Is it because you look at the clock and, my gosh, you've got to get out of the shower and get to work? So you got to get ready. What is it? Do you know what it is that shifts that feeling? Because that's an important thing to know. Impermanence is your best friend. Do you know the concept of impermanence? So impermanence is that everything is always changing. And that when we are in a dark, hard, challenging moment, it feels all-encompassing and overwhelming. But that moment, too, will change. And it will shift. And it will move forward. And so sometimes when you're in the middle of that moment, it's helpful just to say that to yourself. This moment will pass. I won't be here forever. It will change. When I am working with people, and we're talking and they're telling me about how they're feeling and they're telling me about the challenges and the struggles of their day-to-day, and I'm asking questions and I'm wondering things, I get a lot of responses of yes, but. Like, I hear what you're saying, but I'm going to put that aside and I'm going to tell you this. Can you change any of those yes, buts into yes, and? Because just by making that subtle shift from yes, but to yes, and, you're acknowledging that you can have two different, completely opposing feelings at the same time, in the same moment. Coming back to this feeling of being mindful and present, traveling back to right now. How can you do that? Use your five senses. What do you see? What do you hear right now? In the hospital, in the parking lot when you're parked, in your bedroom, wherever you are. How do you use your five senses to bring you back to this exact moment? Change your physical position. If people are kind of overcome by an anxiety moment, I often recommend change your physicality. If you're sitting down and you're kind of getting that bubble of overwhelm, get up, walk around, move your body. If you're outside and it's kind of beginning to kind of hijack you and you're feeling that sense of becoming overwhelmed, come in, change, watch how that just shifts the energy. And now that I've mentioned it, be mindful of that, or observe that for yourselves. I feel that a lot of times in my sessions. I'm in a session, it's intense, we're talking, and just the simple fact of opening the door to my office kind of feels like popping a bubble. Woo! Everything's different. Everything suddenly feels different. So that physicality, that energy, that tenor changes. Breathe deeply. Breathing changes your pace. It quiets us. It slows us down. So taking a breath, and if taking a breath is not enough for you, engage your mind in that breath. And what I mean by that is think about what that breath is doing. Nothing else but what the breath is doing. And just to have a quick anatomy or a Grey's Anatomy like physiology class, what your breath is doing is it's delivering oxygenated blood all throughout your body, right? Your heart and your lungs are connected. And that deep, wonderful breath is taking oxygenated blood all the way down to your toes, all the way up to your brain. It's giving you so much. That's what your breath is doing. So when you take that deep breath, hold on to what you're giving your body. Turn on music. If it's quiet, turn on music. Help that to kind of move your head in a different way. Call a friend. So if you're kind of lost in your thoughts, touch base, get an anchor, and call a friend. This one sounds crazy, right? But I tell this to my clients a lot too. Stomp your feet on the ground. There's 2 feet flat on the ground and stomp them. Wiggle your fingers. Hug yourself. All of those things bring you out of your busy brain, your thoughts, your head heaviness, and into the experience of your body. Touch yourself, give yourself a hug, rub your hands on the tops of your thighs. All of that brings you back to right this second. Let your voice ground you. Speak out loud. You know, this one, it totally works for me. I will tell you, I use this all the time. Before I speak, before I do a big presentation, and I've done some big ones to keynote audiences everywhere, of course I get nervous. I get all in my head. I get bubbly. Will what I say matter? Will it resonate? Am I giving people enough information? And what if it's off? Blah, blah, blah. Oh, goodness. But the moment my voice begins to talk, I feel grounded. And I recognize it all the time. Watch how that might work for you. Can your voice, can speaking out loud, can saying something, even if you're alone, start talking out loud and see if that might ground you. And then balancing and kind of always coming back to this mantra of what is versus what if. Replace those what ifs with what is. What is right now? Be gentle with yourself. Remember, your feelings are likely going to change day to day. We talked about that at the very beginning of this presentation, that the feelings of going through the experience of cancer and caregiving for those that we love, they change all the time. So be gentle with yourself and acknowledge that if you wake up and it's kind of a gray, yucky day, just ride that wave. Because when you go to bed tomorrow, it might be a totally different day. Try not to ignore your needs to share your feelings and your worries and your fears and your questions with others. Because often it's talking with others that helps you work through those concerns and the uncertainties in a natural way. I know I am aware enough to recognize that there are many people who come to my office for therapy who just need to talk it out loud. And it's not really much at all of anything that I say, but it's them needing to hear what they have to say, how they process and work through that uncertainty and that fear, and they come to find their way all on their own. Try not to put on a happy face, because if you're not feeling that way, your true feelings are much more helpful to everyone. And you know what that looks like when you put on a happy face and yet your irritability level is right under the surface. So then it's terribly confusing when you pop off. So if you're more honest and you're more transparent about how you're feeling, then it helps everyone to know where everybody is in this or what the experience is. Talking about cancer can be complicated. Most of the conversations are not a one-shot deal. So you don't have, everything is not riding on this one moment of talking about my feelings or what I need. Or this one experience of sharing with the children XYZ. No. It is, most of these conversations are an ongoing dialogue. You begin, you build the ladder, and you continue. I just worked with a young man who sadly is losing his mother. And he had no idea how to begin those conversations. No idea. And I said, well, let's start from the very beginning. Let's start for where do we start? Let's start with what's happening right now. You're in the hospital. His mom is not very conscious right now, in and out of conscious. Mom, do you know you're in the hospital? I flew in from New York. I'm here with you. Just tell her the present. Give her that. We're going to build this like a ladder over time and finally get to what you want her to know about what she's meant to you and how she lives on in your heart. So we're going to get there. It's an ongoing dialogue. It's a conversation. Keep being as open as you can. Everything becomes different as soon as it's spoken out loud. That's a quote that I found that kind of refers back to that sense of being able to voice your feelings and put them out there. But then this quote right here is Mr. Rogers, who I love. I think we're going to bounce to that screen. Let me see. Oh, there it is. Oh, go back. There we go. I love Mr. Rogers, but this is a Mr. Rogers quote that I just think is fantastic. Anything that's human is mentionable, and anything that is mentionable can be more manageable. When we can talk about our feelings, they become less overwhelming, less upsetting, and less scary. The people we trust with that important talk can help us know that we are not alone. So you're in this together as a team with your loved ones and with your family and with your friends and with all of those around you. How do you begin to openly share and talk together? That is all of the content I have for today, but we do have some time left over, I believe, for some questions and answers. So Sarah, I'll throw that back over to you and begin.
Okay. Thank you very much, Julie. That was fantastic information. And if you do have questions, please type them in the chat box. We've gotten a couple now, so I want those to keep coming in. While we're waiting on that, I also wanted to mention that Triage Cancer has recently developed some resources on identifying stress and managing stress. The quick guide to stress management and other tools can be downloaded for free on our site. We will have a live webinar in November on stress, and if you can't wait until November, we also have another webinar archived that deals with some of the different aspects of stress that you may find useful. All of these resources can be found on our website at triagecancer.org/stress management. Okay, so we have a couple of questions. One that came in earlier was Well, it's when a survivor and a licensed oncology professional is faced with caregiving a spouse, worlds collide. Could you
Mm,
speak about that?
yes. Worlds collide. Do you feel like you almost know too much, right? It is a place of feeling like, how do you not be a professional and yet on the other hand use the experience and the knowledge and all of the resources that you may have to help somebody? I think this is also a dynamic of what the patient, what the survivor is also wanting from you as a caregiver, right? Are they seeking that information and that expertise that you have? Is that what does that help them? Does that ground them? Is that what they're needing from you? Or are they not wanting that from you? What they're wanting from you is to just be present and to be their mother, their spouse, their sister, their brother, and to join them in those types of conversations. And then you have to figure out how you draw those boundaries and take your questions, your concerns, and those conversations that are driven from your experience as a professional to another audience. There might be different people within your cancer scenario that you can kind of give different types of conversations or different types of information. Does that make sense, or does that help? I dealt with that with my mother. Personally, I dealt with that with my mother when my mother was very ill, and how I was not her social worker. And yet, on the other hand, I could use all that I knew about being a supportive caregiver, because this is what I do, as I sat by her side and I listened to her and I understood where she was at and I followed her pace. So it's this interesting dance between being knowledgeable and having that skill set and also following the lead of your loved one.
Julie, you should know that she did answer yes, and thank you very much for talking about that.
Good.
Another question, well, it actually was going back to something you said earlier about rehearsing tragedy. Somebody commented that it is most common among parents. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Well, and I don't. I think many people rehearse tragedy. Could we be thinking it's most common to parents because there's so much life. There's so much life to be lived, right? When children. Wait, hold on. The most common. I'm assuming you're talking about parents of a child cancer survivor. Is that? Am I thinking about that right? Or is it rehearsing tragedy that parents are doing that for their children?
Parents of a child with cancer.
Okay,
So I'm not sure.
so I'm right. So yeah,
yes.
that's how I interpreted it. Okay, good. So yeah, because if you've got a child cancer survivor, then there's so much life ahead of them, right? Knock on wood, hope. All that hope is writing out there of all of the life that you want them to have, all of the dreams and the things that they've yet to experience are all laying out in front of them. And so all of that worry and all of that hope gets all tangled up and messy together. And we begin to rehearse tragedies. I am working with a mother of a young 4-year-old right now, and she just our last session was talking about how difficult she is. She's thinking it's going to be for him to date, or for him to, what about this thing about fertility, or how will that affect him? And again, those what ifs versus what is, we got to bring it back. We got to come right on back to now, and we got to be like, we're going to get to tomorrow. But right now, you've got a 4-year-old, and he's coping great. And he understands this in all the age-appropriate ways. And this is where we are today. And later, when he's a teenager, when he's 21 years old, we're going to get to know who he is then. But we can't even figure out how to address that now because he's 4. So we got to come right back to now, or we're spending energy in a way that may not make a lot of sense. But yes, I get that. How rehearsing tragedy, and how do you come right back to now and come right back to where things are today.
Right. We have a couple of other ones. So somebody mentioned that sleep is a major issue for them. The stress manifests as sleep disturbances. Can you talk about that?
I feel like I spend so many of my sessions talking about sleep hygiene because, we get busy in our days, we get distracted in our days, and some people can become very skilled at compartmentalizing their feelings so that they go into work or they manage it at home. And then all of that kind of floats to the surface when our body begins to slow down and the day gets quieter and it turns night, and all that is waiting for us in the evening. And then people have a hard time falling asleep, or they're waking up throughout the night. And I think that this goes back to when we are in stressful periods of time, we need to tighten up our self-care around sleep, certainly around diet and drinking water. We're always telling people, remember to drink water, remember to eat 3 meals a day, remember, blah, blah, blah. But that's hygiene with regard to your diet and, exercise. Make sure you get outside and you walk. These are the idioms or the cliches that we tell people. But we also need to tighten up our self-care around sleep. And sleep is a cycle and it's a wave. And so we have to be rhythmic with it. So encouraging and reminding ourselves to go to sleep at the same time, waking up at the same time, that's going to help you sleep better. To kind of slow down your day before you just fall into bed. I lived in New York City for quite some time. And so you think a lot about anywhere you live. You have to commute to work, right? You've got to leave at a certain amount of time to get where you're going to go on time. You have to think about your commute. Would you go into work or you go to a medical appointment? Think about going to bed as a commute. So I'm going to give myself a 30-minute commute to bed. And 30 minutes before I want to be laying down, I'm going to turn it all off. And I'm going to use that entire time to quote unquote commute to bed and make that a ritual and a habit. And that will help you to begin to sleep.
Thank you. How about the idea of taking time off to take care of yourself, making you stressed out? Just the idea of taking the time off making you stressed out.
Mm-hmm. Because of the workload that waits for you when you return, or all of the spinning wheels that are happening at work while you're away.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, first of all, I'm going to go back to the present, right? So when you're at work, surrounded by all the emails that are flying in on your desktop and the piles of work on your desk and all that, when you're at work, considering not being there and attending to that is going to be much harder than the end of the weekend when you've been away from it. The distance will be a first buffer, right? The distance will help. Preparing to leave for work. What are the resources available to you at work? So who is in place there? Other colleagues, other coworkers, other partners who can begin to take over some responsibilities if you needed to be off, if you need to be gone. How do you prepare for that time away? How do you maybe begin to practice, boundaries with work even before you take the time off? So practice, what is it like to leave and turn off your work phone and not check emails? Or, how does it feel to leave stuff undone and come in the next day? So beginning to kind of get used to that feeling and setting those boundaries.
Okay. And I think the overwhelming question I've got here today is, will you all get a copy of the slides? And yes, Julie has said that she would be happy to share her slides. So I will send these handouts out to you, everybody who attended today's webinar, excuse me. So just look for an email that will come from me, okay? And I think that's pretty much all the time we have for questions at this point. So to wrap up, I just want to thank everyone. And if you have if you would like any more information about the topic or would like to stay in touch with Triage Cancer, you can email us at info@triagecancer.org. And remember, you can sign up for our newsletter on our homepage at triagecancer.org. And you can connect with us on social media, including Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and our blog at triagecancer.org/blog. And you'll be receiving an email shortly after this webinar that contains the link to the evaluation survey. We would very much appreciate it if you took a few moments to complete it. Your feedback is very important to us. And that concludes today's webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.